Let's go, I see people. Thanks for joining everyone today. We've got a great show for you. We've got our co-host, Renegade. Thanks and welcome back, Renegade. And we've also got Jordan last. Jordan, how you doing, man?
Hello. Pretty well, thank you.
All right. I think it was a really great talk at the conference. It's funny. You and I had talked a bit before about cycle compensation, which is kind of the topic you present here in your talk. And I was fascinated. I learned a lot from when you presented it there. I mean, has your thinking like changed much on that, or I guess maybe we'll get into that in just a bit, huh?
Yeah, I mean, happy to share now, but the idea just keeps, I feel like, getting validated over time. I just had a conversation with someone in the last couple of days. It just seems like a very investable idea for open source software. So,
yeah, great. And I feel like whenever I look at Web3, I'm trying to think through what are the real world implications or use cases, the things that couldn't have been done before. For those who don't know, the cycle compensation is basically something that Jordan presents in his talk that we'll all see in just a bit. And it's kind of a whole new funding mechanism for open source code development. And we'll dive into that in just a bit. But Renegade, why don't you take it away and we kind of dig into getting to know our speaker a bit more and what he's working on.
Yeah, so before we get into the cycle computation and like exactly like the advanced stuff of that, just tell people a little bit about like what your vision is here, like why you got into the ICP with this specific project and kind of where it's going from here, and then we'll get into like exactly what you're doing.
yeah, sure. So the short version is I am a software developer who has always loved open source software, has always loved permissionless technologies like the internet protocols and DNS and the fact that anybody can spin up websites. But when I actually started developing, I realized, holy smokes, this thing is it's like the craziest, most complicated thing ever to get a whole application built front end to back end, deal with servers and all the crazy configurations you have to do. And so I set out on like a, indefinite lifetime journey to find the absolute best development stack so that you could just develop things and not worry about all the crazy extra complications.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been seeking, and eventually I found Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I just love the decentralized nature of them and the properties that arise from that. And DFINITY I found around the same time, and it really seemed like, hey, this has a very, very good chance of becoming like the technology stack that would have the simplest developer experience and would be the easiest to develop for.
And that's because you can use the traditional tools that are made on the internet for this kind of advanced tech, right?
Yes, one of the core nice things about the internet computer is that it uses a WASM virtual machine. So yeah, you are able to deploy many languages to it, theoretically speaking. And also the protocol is designed to abstract away a lot of the complications of security and scalability and such. And so, my company's goal is to get traditional languages and frameworks and databases to work on this decentralized environment on WASM. And our main projects right now are a TypeScript environment and a Python environment.
And so how are you doing that? Like, are you having like a boot camp, or is there something that just happened that you guys like really lifted that up and kind of put it into action?
I started the TypeScript environment in October of 2021. So we have been working on this for a very long time. My company was formed and we got our grant from DFINITY in early 2022. And we've been working on these projects ever since. Just recently though, my whole theory has been just build the tools people already use. Don't make new languages or things that people have to figure out. And that thesis, I think, is very much playing out. People are reaching out. They really want to work with Demergent Labs because I think they see us as a means to their own success because, we don't require we don't require people to learn entirely new things. So yeah, we just had a boot camp with Code and State.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, we had like 30 projects ish. Actually, like put something up on GitHub, so that's awesome. We have a
Can people
course.
check that out? Sorry, I don't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt you, but can they look at that? Can you
you can
post?
go look at every project deployed that GitHub knows about. If you just go to github.com/demergent-labs/azel. Yeah, there's like 150 something dependent repositories, meaning that they're using Azel. You could just go scroll through them. A lot of them are basic, simple things, but I'm hoping there's a few, actual projects that people want to take to the long term out there. So yeah, and we have a huge hackathon coming up. Well, I hope it'll be huge, but in Mexico in October, there should hopefully be around 150 to 200 people there, basically all focused on developing with Azel and maybe a little bit with Kybra. So yeah, it's picking up, which is good.
Okay, let's get into the coding in it. So one of the things I like about your project is that it gives like just developers a way to make money with their code, right? They can sell out the code, and if people use it, or put the code out there, and if people use it, then they can get like a stipend type deal, or like a compounded, monthly payment, or how does that work?
Well, right now, so that is the pipe dream, right?
Okay.
Right now, the projects they're just normal open source projects. You just npm or pip install them. It's just a library that you use, free to use, open source. It doesn't do anything with charging anybody or cycles. But the dream would be, and this isn't specific to our projects, the dream is to create a generalized open, framework or protocol that allows open source developers to make money from their open source projects without having to change the open source license, and staying as close to the open source ethos as possible. Mm-hmm. And that's what my talk is about. And we do that through the cycle mechanism that the internet computer already has, similar to the gas mechanism that Ethereum already has. Once you're able to meter, what makes this possible is that the internet computer and Ethereum and these other protocols, they actually measure all computation, and they do it through like an open, general purpose way. It's not like proprietary or specific to any company. And because of this general purpose measurement of the code, well, you could actually possibly charge. And they do. The protocols actually charge developers and users for all compute resources. So that's already happening. So my idea is, what if we change that algorithm slightly so that the amount we charge, some of it gets diverted back to the open source libraries that are making everything possible.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that AI is going to be integrated into like your project later on, or are you guys kind of not going down the AI route?
So Python is one of the most popular languages to do AI. So I think our Python SDK probably has a very bright future with AI on the internet computer. The internet computer, though, has some fundamental challenges to getting at least model training to work. Training is very compute intensive, but model inference, just giving you back a response to a query or something. Yeah, I could see Kybra and the internet computer excelling at creating a decentralized, inference canister thing.
Would that be useful to a project like yours, like with code? Because AI, like the future of AI is like updating code without actually having to do it. DAOs kind of do it through governance, but do you see your project like integrating with AI, or is that not part of the vision?
Yeah. In my opinion, eventually, Python and TypeScript will probably go away, because I think eventually source code, like high-level source code, like TypeScript, Python, Rust, whatever, I think that's going to become the new assembly or machine code. I think humans will very rarely interact with source code eventually, because the AIs will be doing most of it, and we'll just drop down into it when we have to do something specific. So eventually, I think Kybra and Azel will probably just disappear. I'm going to guess that's multiple years away. So yeah, I think in the short term, though, using AI to allow people to learn Kybra and Azel more quickly. Hopefully, AIs will be able to generate a lot of Kybra and Azel code for people. Yeah, I could see that happening.
Awesome, awesome. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and, for the first time ever, show off the recording of your presentation at the conference this past May. If you've got questions for Jordan, go ahead and comment on YouTube Live, and we'll answer them right after his talk. And yeah, anything you want to say, Jordan, before we go into it, or are we all good to start?
I think we're good.
All right, let's get started.
Jordan Lask, founder of Demergent Labs, creators of Azel, Kybra, and Pseudograph. Come on up here. We're really stoked to welcome you to the stage.
Okay, you can hear me just fine? Sweet. So it's going to be kind of a fireside chat. Tell me about yourself, Jordan. Just kidding. Okay. By the way, this has a laser pointer, which I'm actually going to use. Few of you have heard this story before. I want to give you just the background on like what brought me to the ecosystem. For context, well, I'm going to give you all the context. Then I want to tell you where I'm going. Demergent Labs, that's my company. We're a team of 3. We're building fundamental open source developer tooling. And I think we have possibly a good idea that I really want to run by everybody, and I'd love to talk to you about it and get your feedback afterwards. So early days of my life. For context, I was born in 1991, so the 90s were my playground. I always had this, for some reason, incredible fascination with digital technology. I think a lot of it comes from my dad. He was a software engineer, and we lived in Silicon Valley at the time. And so everything he did to me was just super amazing. And it just gave me this joy. Probably a lot of you feel this way. The ability to create something just brings you joy. And for some reason, digital technology, and especially the internet and the web, I could sense that there was this incredible latent power in them for some reason, right? And obviously, it has absolutely revolutionized the world in many good ways, in some incredibly bad ways as well, unfortunately. I'm an American, grew up in California. I've always been drawn to the principles of freedom that are enshrined in our founding documents and such, which also just fascinates me. Yeah, there we go. And kind of like a common thread as I started to get older and play with technology and get into my degree, which was computer science, was this idea of permissionless innovation. For example, I would always download all these crazy programs and stuff on our family's computer, and like my parents would be like, "Stop doing that," because it like would bring all these viruses. But as a kid, because you don't have any money whatsoever, if I ever had to pay for anything, it was kind of like a non-starter. And my dad told me, "Hey, did you know there's this thing called open source? Like there's software that people actually give away for free." And I was like, "What the heck? That's amazing." And then web programming, like as a kid, I always tried to program. My dad had like this book, like the C Bible or something, and I could do like the first chapter, and then my brain exploded because it was just too hard. But web programming, I just could feel it, that I didn't know the technologies behind it, but HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the fact that as a kid I was sitting at our family computer and like chatting with people, who knows where it was like Yahooligans. It was like for kids, so it wasn't crazy, but like it just felt so powerful. And permissionless innovation, like when somebody builds an open source library, they basically give you they give you a license to basically do whatever you want with it. They're not trying to control you and do all these things. Web programming, you can just create anything from your home. DNS, again, I don't really have to ask permission. Yeah, you have to sign all of these things and stuff, but generally it's open. And I can have a name that I can attach to like a web hosting service. This is what I did. I would open up Microsoft Word. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew if I put like pictures of Dragon Ball Z in there and like wrote all this stuff, I could export it as HTML and throw it onto our like Comcast free web hosting, and it would assign me like a subdomain. And then I literally, as this kid, had a website that was available to everybody with internet access. That was amazing. Oh, and I remember we were driving through like Santa Clara or something one day, and I saw a building, and the Yahoo logo was on the building, and it blew my mind. I was like, I thought Yahoo was just some like random person like me, but it changed my world when I realized like this is actually a big deal. Like there are companies that are doing this kind of stuff. And I feel like a common thread to all of this is decentralization, right? Like, especially the early web in the 90s, I feel like it was in many ways all about decentralization. And I was no special person. I mean, being born in the United States, having a software engineer's dad is pretty cool, but whatever, I just was a normal elementary school kid. And which leads me to my choice of career path, software engineering. It just sounds better than like computer programming. So I started an ed tech company with Bob Bodley. We went to the same university. I was tasked with the entire stack of our software. So full stack, right? Front end, back end. What languages are we going to use to build the UI? What languages, frameworks, databases are we going to use on the back end? And if you don't know, it's extremely complicated to do all this, especially if you want to design for any sort of scale. Turns out we probably could have done everything on like one EC2 instance, but I was planning for massive scale. And to do that, you know, you just have to go down these crazy rabbit holes and try to figure this out. And then, you know, in later companies, because that one didn't quite work out, we worked on it for a couple of years, made a little bit of money. But you know, AWS configuring everything with the load balancers and like dealing with all your ports, and it just gets very, 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 very complicated. Around that time, right, basically the last year of university for me, I discovered Bitcoin and Ethereum. For context, this is 2017. I was in a distributed systems class. So what is a distributed system? There are some problems in the world that cannot be solved with one computer or one process. It must be solved by coordinating many processes together. That's what this class is all about. And I had this feeling, that same feeling I had as a kid observing web programming and JavaScript. This latent power, I felt it with Bitcoin and Ethereum. When you study Bitcoin, in many cases, I think it inevitably leads to Ethereum. That's what happened to me. And it seemed like these were possibly the ultimate distributed decentralized systems. At least they had that feeling, as if they were maybe headed in that direction. And what was even more beautiful is that it was open source, entirely open source, and not just a front-end library or a back-end package. It was like the entire hardware and software stack was open source. I didn't have to go to AWS, give them my credit card, give them all my information, read their silly, ridiculous terms of use that go above and beyond like the laws of the land, which is kind of sometimes arbitrary and annoying. It's just open source. You just have a license and you can use it. And that to me was very powerful. And a common thread, or something I really started to learn in the university, was the power of protocols. For example, the internet stack. What is it? It's just a bunch of protocols. What's that? It's just software that codifies some rules that basically allow processes to communicate with each other and perform a task. And Ethereum and Bitcoin are protocols. And that's beautiful. The internet, like I said, protocols. And just to point out here, like Bitcoin and Ethereum and the whole crypto space is entirely fascinating because it's weaving all these things together. In some ways, they are the heirs of the internet. They are the next generation internet protocols. There's so much fascinating economics going on in the space. There's philosophy. There's politics and freedom. There's libertarianism. There's maybe more progressive type things where you want equality among people. It's an absolutely fascinating space, which leads me to discovering DFINITY. I think this is how it happened. I've told a lot of you this before, I think, but I think I was in my dorm room. I think I was in my bed. I think my feet were dangling over. I wasn't laying down. I was on my phone, like Googling not random, but like trying to learn as much as possible about the blockchain space. And I think DFINITY just came up in my search result. Clicked to their website, read it. Oh, that seems pretty cool. Then basically downloaded like every podcast I could, every interview with Dom, and it's really his vision that has kept me here the whole time. Like, he talked about things he talked about blockchains in terms of a scalable virtual machine and in terms of protocols. He wasn't talking about it like other people were talking about it. And to me, it jived extremely well with basically everything I was learning from my schooling and, the whole permissionless innovation, the idea of protocols. I mean, this guy got it. I mean, I got what he was saying, and it was amazing. And this idea that he wanted to extend the internet protocols to provide something that they never provided before. The internet protocols are stateless. It's all about communicating data. You just send data packets from one process to another process anywhere in the world. You don't do anything else. Compute and storage are not in those protocols, and thus we have this entire industry with mega monopolistic companies to provide the compute and storage in a proprietary way. But Don was talking about it. No, we could actually do that as a protocol, something open and not owned or controlled by one single entity, a true logical world computer. Not one physical computer, but a logical computer. What is that? One computer made of many different computers, basically. That's the internet computer. That is the implementation of Dom's vision. This is what the DFINITY Foundation worked on and continues to work on for years. Again, it's that vision of a world computer where Bitcoin and Ethereum lack. And by the way, the internet computer has trade-offs just like Bitcoin and Ethereum have trade-offs. They choose different sets of trade-offs. But yeah, in many ways, I think the internet computer has an excellent vision that goes above and beyond almost anything I see elsewhere. No one has this vertically integrated full suite of a decentralized computer, not owned or controlled by any single entity. It's been a difficult road. I don't know about you guys, but I am somewhat surprised with how difficult adoption is. I've been following the space for about 6 years, like DFINITY. Some people have been here even longer. Maybe I'm just naive, but it has been a little bit difficult. I think business models and traction are somewhat elusive for a lot of projects. Open source infrastructure, which is incredibly important. I mean, a little thought experiment. Just snap your fingers, imagine, and delete all open source software in the world. What would happen? A black hole would form in the center of the Earth, and it would engulf us all. But it would destroy like everything. Like commerce would just come to a halt, and we'd have to rebuild and form tribes and everything. So that'd be crazy. Right now, it's all funded by grants from the DFINITY Foundation. That's not. I mean, it's sustainable to some extent, but it's not like a scalable, sustainable business model for providing your open source infrastructure. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But Demergent Labs is my company. What are we doing? We are accelerating the adoption of Web3, the internet computer, and sustainable open source. It is one of my personal goals to find open source native business models. What does this mean? A business model that doesn't require you to change your license. Just the traditional OSI business licenses, MIT, Apache, BSD, all those. I want to be able to write software, push it out, and just capture the value that creates, because open source software is possibly the most valuable software ever created. And yet, it's very difficult to capture the value. We're working on ASL. That's a TypeScript canister development kit. We don't believe you should have to learn a new proprietary domain-specific language necessarily to work on a general-purpose computing platform. JavaScript and TypeScript tie with Python for the most popular languages in the entire world. Python is our other project, also a canister development kit. Together, there's like, 20 to 30 million developers. Pseudograph is our GraphQL database. GraphQL is another one of these technologies that I think is just extremely beneficial in the Web 2 world. So, I mean, we're working full-time on these things, and basically, right now, we're just working on ASL and Kybra. incredibly difficult, but they work. They're in beta. They basically have the entire Internet Computer API stack available to you, and we're working hard to get as many NPM packages, as many Python packages as possible to be deployed, so that you just write Python, pull in your package, deploy it, and it just works. Yeah, like just bring the dev tools people already know and love, just bring them over. That's our whole thesis here. Okay, so that's just the background. I just want you to know from a person like me who suffers from the mental disorder of being a programmer, right? That's how I see things. Now, where am I headed? Look, I love what I do. I basically have my dream job. We have a large grant from the DFINITY Foundation that gave us a runway to just build open source tools, to not really worry about anything else and just build it. And that's a dream. But, we want to unlock barriers of adoption to the internet computer, obviously. And I think open source software is one of the best ways to do that. Not everything is an app. There's so much, between the protocol layer and the app layer, there's so much that needs to be built. And I would love to keep building that. And I want to make this sustainable. What happens if we don't get another grant? What happens, I really want to avoid going down the VC route if I don't have to, because I don't want to bring all that extra baggage along if I don't have to. I'm living the dream right now. I'm writing open source software and just pushing it out there and getting paid. Like, what could be better than that? Which leads you, me, and us, all of us, to this idea that I would love to get your feedback on. And let me try to explain it simply and in detail for us here. It's called cycle compensation or cycle sharing, or there's a few other names. I don't know what the best name is yet. And I just want to emphasize that this is potentially a very unique value proposition of the internet computer that would be very, very difficult to do on traditional cloud platforms and possibly on other blockchains as well. But to give you a little bit of background, other blockchains are experimenting with this type of idea under the name of contract secured revenue. There's a project called Conto that has this. Near has something like this. And EIP 6969 was just introduced on the Ethereum Magicians Forum to, they're discussing it there to see if Ethereum layer 2s might want to do something like this. So there's a little bit of prior art. And the idea is that you don't burn all cycles. So on the internet computer, all computational resources and all storage are metered through an asset or a unit called cycles. And basically you burn cycles as your application or your canister that does stuff, basically. And right now they're all burned. And burning means they just disappear, they're non-existent, they're gone. Well, imagine if instead of burning all the cycles, a small percentage were distributed. They kept track of, I think it'd be best to do this at the protocol layer, but imagine they're kept track of somehow, and they're distributed to all of the dependencies of your canister. That is the basic idea. And I think it's very, very important that this be something that is voluntary. So you could opt out of it. You could change the percentage of the compensation that you want to give. And I think what makes this absolutely killer compared to other donation and voluntary models is the extremely low friction. The cycle burning or cycle payment model is already adopted by every application on the internet computer basically by default, right? And if this were switched on, it would make things, that percentage, more expensive, but there is no cognitive overload to the developer. There's no, you wouldn't have to go opt into it necessarily. You could opt out of it. A lot of this is up for debate. The point, or very important to this, is that developers would be able to configure things to make it how they want, if they want to. But by default, it would simply work. To help you understand, I want to show you some. This is the best thing I've ever seen Midjourney do, by the way. Look at that. Just kidding. So this is a Ethereum smart contract in the middle. take a look. It's using Open Zeppelin library. Open Zeppelin is one of the most trusted, amazing companies in Ethereum. Their stuff is battle hardened and like everybody uses it. So how it basically works, this is simplified and might be slightly wrong, but basically, let's say you want to call a function on the smart contract transfer, and it's going to cost you 50,000 gas times whatever the gas price is to do that. Right now, basically a portion is going to go to the validator. So to keep it simple, imagine just half. 25,000 gas tons of price would go to the validators and 25,000 gas tons of price would be burned. Okay, imagine if Ethereum implements this type of model. Simple. 10% goes to Open Zeppelin. Why don't you get this? This is so simple. Sorry. The validators get 22,500 gas and 22,500 gas is burned. And Open Zeppelin happens to be the top level dependency right here. So this is simplified, but Open Zeppelin might have dependencies. And those dependencies might have dependencies. These are called transitive dependencies. So we would need to come up with heuristics for getting this gas fee down to all of those dependencies, but I think there are some simple heuristics we could come up with. And so how would this work on the internet computer? Imagine you have a canister. Here's a little Azel smart contract. So the main dependency is Azel. Imagine it's burning 1 trillion cycles per day. 1 trillion cycles is about like $1.30, $1.40. The protocol would keep track of that, or whatever implementation would keep track of that. And it would burn 1 trillion cycles, but then it would say, well, what's 10% of that? And it would charge that from the canister and send it to the Azel dependency. And again, we would come up with heuristics to deal with the transitive dependencies of Azel. Like I said, I don't think this would be easy or practical to do on other cloud platforms. Imagine how you do that on AWS. You'd need some universal metering system across all of the hardware. Well, we have that because we use WASM as our one and only compilation target, and the metering is built in. Cycle metering, like I said, is making this possible. And why I think this really fits in, like philosophically, we already use ICP, and cycles come from ICP. That's the only way to get cycles. This is just extending the ICP incentivization mechanism that we already use for NNS voters and node operators. How the heck do we pay for node operation with ICP? Node operation is fundamental and core to the network. How do we pay for the governance, which some would argue is fundamental and core to the network? We do it with ICP. So why not extend it to the fundamental core software of the network? And what's absolutely fantastic about this, if it is actually a good idea, is that you make open source investable. This is a very, very simple, conservative, easy to understand model. And if you can convince somebody that based on usage, like if I make a library that's going to be used by 25% of all canisters, for example, it's not unreasonable that the TypeScript, Azel and Kybra, that perhaps someday 50% of all canisters are written in Python and or TypeScript. So if I can walk up to an investor and tell them, hey, we're making $1 per month right now. The internet computer hasn't even scaled anywhere near, Ethereum, Bitcoin, or AWS. Project out, there's an investment case, possibly. It's very simple. It's very sustainable. If it works, right? This is all in theory. Okay, I'll just give you some projections here. This is not the best slide ever created. Midjourney didn't get this one right. So here we have, so left column. We have a few networks. We have the Internet Computer Protocol, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and AWS. And then we have the percent of the fees that would be given out to all the open source libraries. So let's just assume 10%, just to keep it easy. On the right-hand side, we have the total fees, like the total fees for that network. And then we have the cycle compensation or the fee compensation for open source projects. So the left-hand side is just total fees. The right-hand side is the open source revenue stream, basically. So you'll notice ICP right now, which is burning about 5 billion cycles per second. Right now, in total, we're doing $200,000 in fees per year, which is very, 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 very small relative to other networks, at least Ethereum and Bitcoin. So if we implemented this model, that would be a revenue source of $20,000 per year, which is not very much, but for one project, it could work, I guess. And then basically we just scale up. If we scale by 10x, we get $200,000 for open source. 100x, $2 million. 1,000x, $20 million, and 10,000x, $200 million per year for open source, which just sounds outrageous to say you're going to grow 1,000 to 10,000x until you look at other networks. Bitcoin, last I checked, and these are simplified, so I did some research to make sure it was relatively accurate, but Bitcoin is doing about $300 million in fees per year. If Bitcoin implemented something like this, which of course Bitcoin would never do, but that would be about $30 million for open source. Ethereum right now burns $2 billion per year in fees. There is an EIP open, not for the core layer, but for layer 2s. If they implemented this, that would be $200 million for open source. And then AWS, $80 billion in revenue. So if they were somehow able to implement something like this, it would give you $8 billion. The point is just to take a piece of the fees and give it to what's powering your library. It's a very simple concept, and I think it could be incredibly powerful. Because it's open source native, you do not have to change your license. Makes open source software possibly investable. And imagine this virtuous cycle of public goods development. If I can just write the best code possible, push it out, and if it's used the most, then I make money. That sounds like it could create an amazing virtuous cycle of public goods development. And if this truly is a unique proposition of the internet computer, which I theorize it may be, this could be the place where devs can truly come and live their dream. We could create, like open source software developer, it's kind of a career path, but for a very, very small amount of people, that could become an actual viable title that people could use. And I mean, this is just the most simple business model we've thought of. I think there are interesting tokenization models you could possibly build on top. For example, if this revenue stream is actually working, our idea at Demergent Labs would be to keep spinning up fundamental projects and possibly spin them out into foundations or DAOs or something and give them most of that revenue stream so that they can keep doing their operations, and maybe we would maintain a small piece. So as we keep going, we spin it out, make it open, everybody has a little piece of the revenue stream. And obviously Azel, Kyber, and Pseudograph, the idea would be to implement it for these projects if possible. That's basically it. So why I'm still here, the internet computer has an absolutely amazing vision. It's an incredibly interesting piece of technology for all the reasons I said. And I want to keep building open source software and just make this dream come true for developers like you and me. So thank you.
All right. So that was a great fireside chat. That's funny intro that you had there, Jordan. I love it. I think that there's definitely it's something that needs to be kind of between a public good and a purely capitalistic venture. Kind of like I think about the pharmaceutical industry. It's for profit right now, simply because as a public good, the government doesn't really have the capability to run something that complex. But it's also kind of evil because you're inherently motivated to keep people sick, right? Open source code is kind of the ultimate public good of the internet itself. So thinking about new ways to finance that, I think is really exciting. And at one point, I just want to ask real quick, you mentioned that this is not something that's in existence, and that it's something that we want to kind of lobby to have DFINITY incorporate. But you mentioned it could be or could become possibly a competitive advantage or a key advantage of the IC. Why is that? Why do you think it might be more doable on the IC compared to maybe another blockchain or another network, or is it just the first network that starts to really find a good way to do that do this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it could be the case that it's easy for other blockchains, but I feel like because of the amount of computational resources available to the internet computer, it's probably going to be easier. And the fact that the internet computer is able to upgrade with significant changes much more easily. So all those things combined, it just might be much easier for the system to account for all these things and distribute. But who knows? It might be just fine for Ethereum or others to do it. We have generally more flexibility, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely makes sense. And you know, the first time you and I personally spoke about this concept, it was, oh gosh, it was I think October of last year or something at that one of the launch events for Code State. And even back then, you were talking about how it would be something that's voluntary, perhaps it could be verifiable. So, like, oh, this dApp pays for their dependencies. They're nice guys, work with them, whatever. Have a protocol way to like verify that. And at the time, it still seemed like it was something that's going to be necessary to implement on the protocol level. Do you think that there's any possible way that it wouldn't have to be something that we wait on DFINITY for, but maybe those in the ecosystem could find a way to implement something like this?
Yeah, I mean, we could. It's just how clunky and annoying would it be? So, yeah, we could. Just you'd have to deploy infrastructure to do it, and I think that the hardest part, it'd just be more complicated, and someone would have to deal with running it. So, and I want to keep as few changes. Like, we don't want. If I deploy a canister written in JavaScript, I don't want to have to deploy like a bunch of extra timers or code that's making everything more expensive. Like, I think that's the worst part, is how do we stop that from happening? If you do it at the protocol layer, then you don't have to change anybody's code. That's what's nice.
Okay. So it's just kind of like ease of use. You could still be able to enable or disable it, but if it was at the protocol layer, you wouldn't have any additional frictions added to the actual dApp performance or anything like that. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's be the goal.
That totally makes sense. Yeah, who knows? I mean, I think that we're all kind of hoping that. DFINITY does incredible work. I think compared to a lot of foundations, I mean, I think they kind of just blow everyone out of the water. Like, I haven't seen a foundation for a blockchain pump out features at the rate DFINITY does. So they're definitely strong. But I think a lot of us are also waiting for the day when we see other contributors adding stuff to the protocol. So who knows? Maybe we can push for DFINITY, or maybe somebody from an ecosystem might find a way to submit an NNS proposal to update just into the protocol. Who knows? But yeah, let's get to a couple audience questions here. All right, so here's a good one, and you can go read this one out, Renegade.
All right. So how do you recommend start building on blockchain and ICP, and why ICP?
Probably the easiest way is to use one of our projects, Azel, if you know TypeScript or JavaScript already, or Kybra if you know Python. That's the easy way to get started in prototyping very quickly. If you already know Rust, use Rust. If you want to use Motoko, you'll have to learn that language. But
can you do that on other like blockchains? Can you integrate with like TypeScript or Azel on like Ethereum, or is that internet computer?
No, right now Azel and Kybra are specific for the internet computer. But other blockchains, a couple others have some sort of JavaScript or Python support, but it seems early days for everybody.
Yeah, and in your boot camp that we did with you a while back, it was DAOs, right? Like, we had in 1 week, everyone was able to build and deploy a DAO using TypeScript, which I think is probably not only one of the first times that's ever been possible, but DAOs on the IC are able to actually update the source code of other smart contracts. So like definitely the first time it's been done with TypeScript for that level of DAO. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, and we got a question here from Maggie. He's got 3 questions, but I think I'm just going to pick one because I feel like it was tied to the nature of your talk. It's the middle one right here, right, Maggie? What is your vision for the future of the web? So you talked about what attracted you to Dom's vision was he's like adding new like elements to the toolbox of like what the web is and the base protocols. But on social media, and we hear you talk about a lot of things like ZK WASM and things like that. I mean, when you kind of like now sit back and think, like, what do you see as the future of the web, maybe 10 years from now or so?
I mean, my hope is that the future of the web is a place of great privacy and sovereignty for every individual. It's not captured by commercial interests entirely. Like, there will be commercial interests. I think open source software development will hopefully be a career choice, right? If we get cycle compensation or something similar working, you can just, if you build something amazing and people use it, then it just works. You own your data. You walk into, let's say you walk into like a hospital or something. Usually they give you a bunch of paperwork. No, you will walk in and you'll demand them to sign things for you cryptographically, like that kind of stuff. Like, we should be, the sovereigns, they should be afraid of messing with our stuff. So I'm hoping to just see a world of even greater prosperity and even greater collaboration if we do it correctly.
Yeah.
Good, man.
More power to you. I've mentioned it like in a call yesterday. I feel like what I love about Web3 is it's kind of a blend between a technology and a revolution. Like, it's not just a technology. It's by its very core, by its very nature, a call to action for things to change and for us to like reorganize resources and people and organizations to work differently. So like the Web3 emerging industry is actually a revolution by its nature. So yeah, that's awesome, man. And we had a question here, and you can read this one out, Renegade.
Since you're advocating for open source with Demergent Labs, doesn't it give the way for shady people to tamper with the code since they're open to everyone?
I don't really understand this question because open source has been around for like multiple decades, and this isn't a problem.
Right.
So, not sure what this means.
I think it's also a misunderstanding of maybe what open source is, because it doesn't necessarily mean anyone can change the code base.
Yeah, open source generally means you can read the code and are free to use the code. Once you deploy something that's open source, if you deploy it onto a Byzantine fault-tolerant platform like the Internet Computer or Ethereum or Bitcoin, then that code is extremely secure against unauthorized usage. So maybe what you're suggesting is, if it's open, people might be able to find vulnerabilities in it more easily, and I think there's an argument for that. But there's also an argument against that, which is the more people can see it, the more, if they're honest, if we have more honest people able to look, then maybe we can find all vulnerabilities more quickly than we could have before. So yeah, it's a risk, but I don't know. I tend to lean towards, instead of thinking like, oh my goodness, what bad things could possibly happen? What if instead we think, well, what good things could possibly happen? And we don't want to prevent those good things from happening. So
yeah. And I think it's just, I wanted to put that question up because I think it's important for people to understand that, that, just because it's open doesn't always mean that just anyone can go ahead and add and edit it willy-nilly. But also, the internet itself, everything that you use on a day-to-day basis depends on multiple open source code bases. So like we just wouldn't have the internet if it wasn't already a model that works. And frankly, I feel like Web3 itself is a natural evolution of open source. It's software that's not owned by anybody. Like the ultimate open internet service is L1 blockchains themselves. We got a question here from Raul Badillo. Hey, how are you doing, Raul? I've seen you around before. He's asking if you could tell us more about the upcoming bootcamp you mentioned at the beginning of the live stream. But actually, the bootcamp was in the past a couple months ago. I think it was last month, maybe. I wasn't part of helping you with that. Seb was working on you with that, so I don't know the exact details. But it's the hackathon coming up, right? Like, is there anywhere people can go?
Yeah, there's a hackathon going on in Tepic, Mexico, on the 6th and 7th of October at a university there. I don't remember the name of the university, but it's being put on by Zona 3, and maybe ICP Hub Latin America, if they might be collaborating. So you go find Zona 3 on on Twitter, or you can DM me and I can send you the information. But yeah, it's October 6th and 7th in Tepic, Mexico at a university.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll be posting on it from your X profile, so people can go ahead and follow Demergent Labs on X and just stay in a loop with that kind of thing.
Is that only in person, or can you join online?
I don't know. I'm guessing it's just in person.
Okay, cool. And I do know we have a large cohort of Spanish-speaking ICP devs, especially since the prior boot camps earlier this year. And we got this one last question from Dorilo. When is the expected release date for Azo and Pseudograph's 1.0 versions? I know it's already working right now, so I'm not sure if this is applicable.
Yeah, it works. So I don't know. For Azel, I'm hoping to get a release candidate out by the end of the year, which means we're beyond beta.
Mhm.
I mean, it's also based on, like, you don't have to wait to use it, but you just need to determine for yourself what you're comfortable with. So what's coming up is we have already swapped out the JavaScript engine. We're going to release that soon. So that improves the security and performance of the project. And basically what's remaining would be writing a bunch more tests, property tests in particular, and possibly either reviewing the code ourselves or maybe getting some external reviews. So by the end of the year, we should hopefully have a lot of those tests written. And then, I mean, the reviews wouldn't take that long. We just need to get the resources or decide what to do. So perhaps I think we'll be out of beta by the end of the year. Pseudograph, we have deprioritized for the moment. We are focusing on Azel and Kybra. And we might be able to get you some, not as good as Pseudograph in my opinion, but maybe better in some other ways. But hopefully get you SQL and GraphQL and other like native NPM and PyPy packages so that you can start putting these things together yourselves. So hopefully that'll be coming also very soon.
Yeah, that's great. And, I will say, Seb mentions that he was really pleasantly surprised with how solid Azel was. It just worked really well. We had, you're running a boot camp. Pretty much, it's a great way to find a bunch of issues. And he didn't hear of anyone having issues with your SDK. So that's pretty awesome. I mean, I think that's a great use case. So anyone watching, definitely go ahead and follow Demergent Labs on X. Keep up with everything awesome that they're doing for ICP and just Web3 as a whole. And for those ambassadors watching this cast, we've got CycleComp as your Zealy keyword for today. Be sure to join us next week with Dan Ostrowski of NFID. It's going to be a great talk. And it's next Thursday, the 28th at 5 p.m. CET. And Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're incredibly busy, especially with your releases that are coming up. It's been a busy time of year for you, so I really appreciate you taking the time to attend today. And Renegade, great as always. Good to have you on here. Keep fighting the fight, man.
Sure.
Awesome.
And I just want to say, man, I love the vision that you have, Jordan. That's why I'm here, is because of Dominic Williams' vision, and this video just made me like connect with you on like a real level. I was like, man, this guy he gets it, and so that's what we need in the community, is people like you that are champions, bro.
Sweet, thank you.
People here for the tech, bringing crypto back to its roots. That's what I love about the ICP ecosystem. So, thanks for all you do, Jordan, and everyone else out there. Fight the FUD and stay bullish. We'll see you next week.